Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Older Americans Month, and we celebrate the wisdom, experience, and contributions of older Americans who enrich and strengthen our communities, in part through their passion for improving opportunities for future generations. Our presenters today will be Dr. Deborah Carr, Professor of Sociology, Director of the Center for Innovation in Social Science at Boston University, and author of the newly released book, Aging in America, and Lisa Ogburn, master's degree in elder consultant, writer, and public speaker. She's going to talk about aging in America and discuss Dr. Carr's book, and they're going to share personal experiences through a conversation and provide insight on how we think about aging and why helping aging adults remain independent and engaged benefits us all. Before we go further into today's program, I would like to do some housekeeping. As always, keep your microphones on mute throughout the entire session. Please send all of your questions to the chat room. The chat room will be monitored, and we will work to make sure all of your questions are answered in an orderly fashion. This session will be recorded, and you will be able to view this program later on demand. Speaking of on-demand recordings, you will be notified soon of today's program's availability and all of our recent programs when they are ready to be viewed. We are pleased to announce the following upcoming programs: Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, April the 4th, and Military Appreciation Month, April the 8th. We look forward to seeing you there. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Deborah Carr. Deborah Carr is a professor of sociology and director of the Center for Innovation in Social Science at Boston University. Dr. Carr has written widely on aging and social inequalities, publishing more than 120 peer-reviewed journal articles and chapters. Her latest book is Aging in America, and her 2019 book, The Golden Years, Social Inequality in Later Life, received the 2020 Innovative Publication Award from the Gerontological Society of America. Her research and commentaries have been featured in the New York Times, CNN, Psychology Today, and more. Dr. Carr is currently editor-in-chief of Journal of Health and Social Behavior, and she served as editor-in-chief of Journal of Gerontology, Social Sciences from 2015 to 2020. She is a fellow of the Gerontological Society of America and the 2022 recipient of the Matilda White Riley Distinguished Scholar Award of the American Sociological Association section on Aging and the Life course. She received her PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and has held faculty positions at the University of Michigan and Rutgers University. Today, 3 lucky attendees will be selected to receive a copy of Dr. Carr's new book, Aging in America. I am going to turn the program over to my colleague at OSHR, Lisa Coffey, and she will be introducing our other speaker, Lisa Ogburn. I'm going to turn it over now to Lisa Coffey. Lisa?
Thank you, Wendy. Lisa Ogburn is an elder consultant with a Master of Education and her own agency, Agent Advisors NC. She writes and speaks widely on things that scare us as we age. Lisa came to the field through the doorway of personal experience, taking care of her father-in-law in their home, which she wrote about for the New York Times. She previously taught at Duke in the School of Medicine and with pediatrician photographer John Moses founded the Documenting Medicine program. Her writing has been featured in the New York Times, WRAL, Runner's World, Academic Medicine, Psychology Today, Huffington Post, and other places. During the height of the pandemic, Lisa also led free writing groups through the Things They Carry project.org, a collaboration between psychoanalysis and writers to benefit the mental health of healthcare workers nationally, looking for ways to process the trauma associated with working in the COVID trenches. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our guest as we listen in on their insightful conversations.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and begin while we're waiting for the video to place us on the stage. What a pleasure to be here with, may I call you Debbie, Dr. Carr?
Absolutely. May I call you Lisa?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Lisa and Wendy, thank you for that kind introduction. It really is a treat to be with you all and share some of the many things we both have learned. We come from two different angles. Debbie, who has documented in this incredible book that you'll see I post-it noted, so many things about where we are today in history with aging. And maybe before we get started in our conversation, Debbie can provide a context of what aging looks like today in America.
Sure, I would love to. It is my pleasure to speak with you, Lisa, and with everyone in the audience. Aging today, as I like to say, is not your grandmother's or grandfather's aging, right? We have more older adults on the planet than at any other point in history, and the planet is continuing to get older. So about 17% of all Americans today are ages 65 and older. And by the year 2030, it'll be 1 in 5. And we've never had such an older population. And it's due in part to the aging of the baby boomers, those 75 million people born between 1946 and 1964. So not only are there a lot of older adults, but they are tremendously diverse. And I think sometimes when the public talks about old age, they have a very narrow view. They picture an older woman playing canasta at a nursing home, usually a white woman. And that's not actually an accurate portrayal. Older adults are from anywhere between age 65 and 115, right? That's a many year gap. And so they're very different on the basis of age and physical health and sensory health. There's also greater racial and ethnic diversity than ever before. There's greater diversity with respect to sexual orientation and gender identity and politics. And so there's no one way to be an older adult. And so I think when we talk about older adults, we have to recognize they're just as diverse as younger people. They also vary with respect to families. And we do have, unfortunately, more older adults growing old alone than ever before. And there are challenges that poses, but for those who prefer to be on their own and those who have the health and wherewithal to live alone, it actually can be a rewarding time. So those are just a couple nuggets to start our conversation, but there are many ways to grow old today.
That's wonderful to highlight that it's not what we used to perceive as older age. Going along the theme of Aging Unbound of this series, draw out some interesting statistics from your perspective. I mean, one thing that I saw in your book distinguished whether you were young old, middle old, and older old. And what are some trends that you see among those stages?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of nuance in who is old. And so for kind of statistical purposes, older adults are considered those age 65 and older. But talk to any 65-year-old, and some of them are still running marathons and traveling the world, and they feel they have absolutely nothing in common with someone who is 85 or 95 or a centenarian who's 100 years old. And so recognizing that, scholars of aging now classify 3 subgroups of old people. There's young old, which is 65 to 74, kind of just older, which is 75 to 84, then the oldest old, which are ages 85 plus, and then a very special category called centenarians, which now are just about 1 to 3% of the population, but that's actually the most rapidly growing group. So not only do we have the share of the population that's age 65 plus growing, but people are living longer and longer. And I think that's really important to share, because with those different age transitions come different health issues and different health concerns. So, for instance, there's a perception out there all old people are senile, right? We know that's not true. We know that it's very rare for someone to have cognitive impairment at age 65 or 70. And if they do, their symptoms are very different than someone who has cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's at age 85 or 100. And so whenever we think about older people, whether it's coworkers that we want to accommodate or aging family members, we really need to consider the fact that they vary widely in terms of their ages and their physical capacities and their desire to stay engaged or not engaged, right? There are some people who do not want to go into long-term care and they don't want to sit around in a rocking chair all day. And so we need to just keep our eyes and ears open and try to accommodate those wishes as best we can.
Mhm. And I found in my practice that it's a really interesting time to accommodate those wishes, right? There's so many new technologies, and I often work with older people who are almost entrepreneurial about their problems, right? I recently met with an older physician who wanted to keep his wife at home, who was falling a lot, but he couldn't lift her up. It's a very common problem in probably the older old, right? In that third category. Um, but he found that there was a blow up chair from Scotland that he could flatten in 5 seconds, roll her onto, and heighten her to the sofa. Now, I don't expect all of you to need or want or be able to even access a blow up chair. But what I do want to illuminate is how often these limitations that come with each stage of aging, there are more tools than we might think. Uh, and so in that perspective, it is a wonderful time to grow older. One resource that the state of North Carolina has is